welcome back to another Flip in the Barrel podcast, the podcast where we interview energy leaders to find out more about their career and life journeys. We're almost at the 5-year mark of starting this podcast, September 2019, so 5 years coming up. We cannot thank you enough for the support over the years of just sharing episodes that you liked, giving us comments, a review, rating, reaching out on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for this beautiful community that we've built over the past 5 years. Today on the podcast, we have the pleasure of interviewing Kaes Van Hoff, who's the president and CFO of Diamondback Energy, based in West Texas. Before joining Diamondback, Kaes served as CEO of Bison Drilling and Field Services, where he kicked off his Midland oil field career. We're going to hear a little bit more about that as we get into his story. He started out as an analyst and worked in investment banking in New York. Nothing to do with oil and gas at that time or thinking he would get into the oil and gas industry, but you'll see how he ended up there. And let's not forget, he was also a professional tennis player who fell into the oil and gas industry in a very unique way. So, Kaes, thank you so much for saying yes to coming on the podcast. We loved your story, and these are the kind of stories that we love sharing of just incredible leaders who've made it to the top in their game and really started with nothing to do with where they are today. So thank you so much for saying yes again.
No, thank you guys. I mean, it's amazing what you built over the last 5 years, and it's just a privilege to spend some time with you today.
Thanks, Kaes. And I have to say, when we first met you and we were learning about your story, I was in utter shock. So getting into the first, question here is going to be around, growing up, and not to mention you grew up in Southern California. So another area where really, when you think about fossil fuels, oil and gas, it's not heavily loved there. So you grew up in Southern California. Your dad, who is 100% Dutch, which says a lot about your last name. He was a pro
Makes
tennis
a lot of
player.
sense.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. He was a pro tennis player, which that was just kind of like mind blowing to me, just thinking about where you're at today and coming from these back roots of like your dad, professional tennis player. And your siblings were all diverse in themselves. Like your sister ended up living in Australia. Your brother's a photographer. So like nothing that really aligned with, being, a CFO of an oil and gas company. And you also decided to play tennis, and you got a scholarship to USC. But more importantly, you were an NCAA champion in doubles with your father. So tennis was definitely something that was a game that you were not just good at, but you were passionate about. Tell us about those experiences growing up in Southern California. I envision like y'all playing tennis, the beach there, like this whole vibe. Very different than Midland. So what was that like, and why at that time too you were really wanting to pursue a career in finance, which seems kind of odd compared to the history of your siblings and your father. What kind of pushed you in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, listen, growing up in Newport Beach is definitely not Midland, but somehow I ended up here. It was a great place to grow up. Play tennis in the morning, go to the beach in the afternoon. It was a little different food than what you get in Midland. A little different vibe, a little different lifestyle, but it was great. It taught me a lot. Tennis taught me a lot. Obviously, a lot of discipline, a lot of hard work, and I was the oldest kid with my dad. Being a top 25 in the world tennis player, the oldest boy is going to play a little tennis to kick things off. And fortunately for my dad, though, over time, as successful as he was as a coach, he coached the number one player in the world, Lindsay Davenport, when I was a kid. He always let tennis be my decision. Never really forced it on me. I mean, obviously I learned the game from him, but then really took to it and really kind of wanted to follow in his footsteps. Ironically, I thought I was going to go to Stanford, but Stanford didn't offer me a scholarship. So I kind of said, I don't know if I want to do that. And I had more fun at USC on my recruiting trip. And so, both my parents met each other at USC, and I was fortunate enough to go there during the good years of the football team, right? When we won a couple national championships, and Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush. And
that had been a fun time.
Fun time to go to USC. So that was a blast. And, I was always kind of passionate about, finance, the stock market. My grandma always had, would buy me 5 shares of a stock every birthday, growing up. So I was very intrigued by New York City.
So,
And yeah, go ahead.
so when your tennis career kind of ended because
Yeah.
you kind of stopped playing and focusing so much on it, when you decided to kind of pursue your dream of going into investment banking, and you started as an analyst in New York. Tell us a little bit about, just as the career was ending in tennis. I mean, you could still play tennis, but it wasn't your main focus like it was for a few years. Um,
Well, I wasn't making any money. I had to get a job. Tennis is a
you're like,
tough
okay, I need
sport
a
to be
real
a.
career now.
Yeah, I had to get a real job at some point. But but tennis taught me a lot, and it exposed me to New York and the life that I wanted to go pursue there. So that kind of tied together. I played the U.S. Open in 2009, and the house that I stayed at, the parent was one of the top guys at Citigroup, and so he kind of helped me
Mm.
understand the business, understand what's going on, understand that New York was the place to really start your career. And I kind of knew that I wasn't going to play tennis forever, but it was a really fun time to do it. Well, 2008, 2009, there weren't a ton of jobs. So
Mm.
I got to go see the world. I think I went to like 35 countries in 50 weeks. And,
Wow.
there's only one time in your life you can do that. And that was kind of right after school. So it was a nice marriage of tennis going into to New York City with that relationship, that I built during the U.S. Open in 2009.
That's incredible. And it's all a journey, like you don't have to rush to anything. You can still be very successful, even if you take a few years in between here and there and do different things. So I think that's really important in your story. Um,
Yeah, so many people talk, coming out of school say, "Hey, I got to do 2 years here, and then I need to do 2 years here, and
yeah.
then, and at the end of the day, life might take you to Midland, Texas. Who knows, right? I
Who would
mean,
have known?
right? Be patient and wait, and as long as you're working hard, whatever you're doing, and pursuing, something you're passionate about, then be patient. It doesn't always have to fit the formula perfectly, and so many people coming out of school want to hit all these specific, timelines that it's not going to work out that way.
Yeah, no, I love that you mentioned that. So many people are on timeline of graduating in 4 years, and then I need to be a manager by this year, and then I need to be XYZ, and then you kind of forget about the whole journey and just taking these little side roads that can help you get to where you want because you're collecting all of these skill sets going
Yeah,
lateral.
patience.
I love that. So tell me a little bit about just your thoughts about the oil and gas industry when you were in New York. So you were an analyst and you went into kind of investment banking. It's not that you knew about, West Texas necessarily or like oil and gas, but you did start to dip your toes into it as you were taking on customers or working with oil and gas kind of, companies. Tell us a little bit about just your perception about the industry, not growing up around it.
Yeah, so I didn't know the first thing about oil and gas, right? I was one of those kids that just thought electricity came from the magic electricity fairy. But I then started to learn a lot about this business. I left City and went to a company called Wexford Capital, which is a private equity fund in Connecticut, and that's where I got introduced to Midland. They had a bunch of investments down here, Diamondback being one of them. And I always tell the story like I bombed the interview, but I knew how to model. So I was kind of the kid that just got put. Hey, we're gonna go look at these businesses in West Texas. You might not know anything about it, but you know how to model. So the partner that I worked with, Steve West, who is was our chairman for a long time, started flying me down to Midland. That's how I kind of met Travis and started getting to know what was going to become Diamondback Energy, and started to learn about this business. And I think it's fascinating to go from Manhattan on the weekends to West Texas during the week. You see a very big juxtaposition of the country, and you start to understand so much more about. I call it the real world, right? And
Yeah.
if you're living in New York City or Newport Beach, that's not the real world. In Midland's a real place, and it's been amazing to watch the industry as well as this city, evolve in a dramatic way over the last 10, 12 years.
You brought up something that really sparked some of like interest, and I wanted to ask you was, you were you grew up in California, you were working in New York, you spent this time in Midland. Obviously, like you mentioned, very vastly different, but you also pinpointed the fact that a lot of people really do, when they grew up in some of these areas, they really think that electricity is literally like the unicorn, like you just plug
Yeah.
it in and it works. Going through this experience, and then of course now living in Midland and knowing the people and knowing the industry, what do you think we're doing wrong in this industry? I mean, you were part of, New York. People see New York as this finance, they know they know what it brings, they know what it does. But when we talk about energy specifically, when you talk about Midland and some of these areas that are really hard to get even people to go to, our marketing around our energy perception to the world is not very good. So what have you learned just being in Midland that maybe, we should be advocating for, as an energy sector, but more importantly, like as operators in the energy space?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time on this. Why does our industry have such a poor perception problem? And it's not just a recent phenomenon. I think it's gotten worse over certainly through COVID and coming out of the COVID lows and ESG wave of, these guys are going away in the next 2 years and everyone's going to be driving an electric car. I mean, I think it honestly goes back to the fact that this business has never had to market itself, right? So unless you're a downstream gas producer or gas station operator, you don't have to market your product, right? Every barrel and every molecule we produce every day is bought sight unseen without us having to do anything. And so, I think the industry certainly has made mistakes over the years, over the last 50 years, but now I think it's kind of we're at the point where we need to stop being defensive, right? And I'm guilty of this too. Like I'm sometimes defensive of what we do, and that's not how this should work, right? We need to be offensive and kind of control the narrative and take control of explaining what we do because, I go back to California and talk to my friends. They know I'm in the oil and gas business, but they really don't know what that means, right? They know what a pump jack is. They know what a gas station is. They have no idea the value chain that goes into, producing a barrel or getting, power to their house or gasoline in their car. And, some of it's shame on us as an industry, but I think we got to kind of, instead of being defensive and fighting back, we need to be positive and forward thinking. And honestly, I do think some of the tide has turned even since we started talking. We met like a month ago. The amount of people that are paying attention to what's going on in natural gas, nuclear, oil around the world. I mean, the tide is shifting that people are going to understand that we're going to be around for a very, very long time. And if you want to use your Meta AI on your Instagram, there's going to be a lot of natural gas that goes into, making sure Meta AI works for you.
I like that you shared that. And at the end of the day, it's really just about educating. And then also, I think to your point of back in the day, and it's true, you don't necessarily have to market your barrel, like it's going to be bought regardless. But I think now companies are starting to see with that shortage of pipeline of talent that, other industries have done a great job at like marketing what a career would look like, that, I think we need to continue to do a better job. And I do see companies do a better job today than they were years ago on bringing that talent and showcasing the career you could have, being a drilling engineer or working in energy in general.
Yeah, we're trying. We've had. It was interesting the conversations we had with some of our younger professionals coming out of COVID. A lot of them were reading about the death of their industry every day, and that's a tough marketing proposition to go get kids from Texas Tech or LSU, A&M, UT. I mean, when they have other options with Austin blowing up and in the tech world, everybody want to be on the tech side. Well, tide's kind of turning now. Now, I think what needs to happen is, and what has happened a little bit is, this is a cyclical business, right? It's always going to be very cyclical, but we've tried to build a steadier business model that results in steadier output, not highs and lows, not boom and bust on our side, and also, I'm proud to say that Diamondback was one of the only companies, not the only company I know, that didn't let anybody go through COVID. And that builds loyalty, and that tells a 23-year-old that, hey, I can work here for 10 or 20 years. Not all of them are going to, but they can say that this could be a real profession for a long time.
Yeah, I remember when you mentioned that, and that's pretty incredible that there was no layoffs of employees during COVID, which was technically like the lowest of the lows. So if you can get
Yeah,
through
look,
COVID, you've got a long career there. There's no need to worry of the next.
those were some scary times, but you also learn a lot from it, right? I mean, I think the first Black Monday, which was kind of the Saudis flooded the market,
Mm-hmm.
COVID started shutting everything down. We kind of said, Travis and I had a conversation. We said we're going to protect three things. We're going to protect our people, our dividend, and pay our interest expense. And anything else is table stakes to be cut from a cost perspective. So, we went from 23 rigs down to 5 rigs in I think like a month and a half,
Oof, yeah,
and
tough.
then we had to start doing math in April of should we even produce the barrel or should we make more money on the hedges? And so that was kind of a scary moment, but you learn a lot from these down cycles and these tough times, and I'm very very happy that we made the decision not to have any reduction in force. We still paid stock comp. It was a low stock price, but that builds a lot of loyalty over the course of these cycles.
Yeah, I think it comes down to putting people first, and that's definitely something, Travis is big on, and everybody at the leadership at Diamondback. And just before we get into how you got into Diamondback, I want to kind of bring you back to 2012, which is kind of when you
The
were
good old days.
sent to Midland to run Bison, the company I mentioned in your intro. And what I was very curious on is like your background was investment banking, it was the financial sides, and all of a sudden you're like gonna go run this oil field like drilling company, I believe, in Midland, with the title, with like being at the top of this company. Tell us a little bit about how you handled, or what was your mentality going into it. I know you mentioned it was a lot of like just open communication of like, you guys know better than me, or you know how to drill better than me, et cetera. Not coming in with like, well, I'm the CEO now running this company, you all listen to me. You really took it of, I'm here to run what I know how to run, and you guys know how to do your thing. Tell us a little bit about just, that must be a big transition from all of a sudden you end up in Midland and you're running a company from being in banking.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. I was 26, and they said go down to Midland and start building businesses on the service side that Diamondback and others can use to grow their business. And we had a COO down there, a guy named Barron, who I worked very closely with. And Barron, the guy had drilled North Sea, he drilled in Alaska, he'd been to Egypt. I mean, the guy had been all over, and so very clearly he knows how to drill. I don't know how to drill. I know how to run the numbers. And so I've always kind of lived by this mantra of know what you don't know. I know that I am not a geologist. They speak a different language than me. I know I'm not a lawyer. Sometimes I pretend to be a lawyer, but I know that I need to trust the experts. And so know what you don't know has kind of been something that has really stuck with me for a long time. And as a 26-year-old going down to Midland, Texas, I had to know that you're stepping into their world, and those guys are salt of the earth individuals that know how to run rigs, heavy machinery, welding, run trucks. I didn't know any of that, but I knew how to get it financed. I knew how to cut costs and make sure we had good contracts, and so we kind of really split the business between the two of us. I had a title, but at the end of the day, it was more of a partnership than I'm the CEO, I'm the boss, and really that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of translated, I think, to Diamondback, where we've tried to have a very flat organization. Try to reduce the number of direct reports that we have at the top, and try to really push everything to the subject matter experts, and operate at the we call it operate at the speed of trust. Like trust that that person knows what they're doing, but also support them. If there are mistakes or issues do pop up. I mean that's what a management team really should be. We shouldn't be micromanagers. We should be empowering other people in our organization to make the best decisions.
Yeah, it's amazing what can happen in organization when you do empower your employees. And to your point, everybody has their own skill set that they're really good at, and when you empower them to be, that own that skill set, you end up getting a lot better work out of them. And it really sounds like that's kind of the culture that y'all wanted, but more importantly, that from the very start you created.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I,
and
I
they build confidence, right? It builds
mhm.
confidence for them to say, I can do this and I can do that, and we've done a lot of things that have really pushed the envelope on efficiencies and all the deals that we've done. We've done $40 billion worth of deals. You got to believe that you can execute on a pretty solid number of deals to be able to do that. And so the infrastructure and the culture that we have is really trying to, keep pushing forward, keep pushing. Because if you're not pushing in this business, you're dead.
That's that's for certain. And
You go away. Yeah.
yeah, also a big part of the business is relationships, and that's something that you really had early on when you met with Travis, the CEO of Diamondback, and he mentored you, and then he ended up offering you the role that we've been speaking about that you have today, but more importantly, when you became a part of Diamondback. But at the time, you were really actually thinking about going back to California, and so this was kind of a pivotal moment for you. But what I really want to ask you about this is just the reason that relationships are so important and how that has impacted your career, because you would not have gotten the role, of course, if you didn't know Travis, but more importantly, if you didn't foster those relationships, because relationships are a two-way street. And we really try to speak with a lot of people about this, especially young professionals, on really ensuring that they have those relationships and connections. Can you tell us like some advice that you might give to an intern or like a person coming in, like how to build those close connections? And then also any examples in your career where it really paid out for you to have those close relationships?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think relationships are very, very important. Everyone talks about networking. I don't. You don't want those relationships to be transactional, right? You want them to feel real. And I think a lot of early career professionals are worried that they need to have all these relationships to get this thing, to do that thing. Well, like I think things are going to come naturally if you act naturally in those situations. And people inherently want to help you, right? Senior people in your organization, mentors, people that have been there, they want to help you. So don't be afraid to reach out. I mean, if you're, my door's open to our intern across the way, right? I mean, and that's important. That I may not be the guy that hires him or mentors him for 10 years, but that relationship's always going to be there. So I think that for me that really started with Travis, and Travis and I have a great relationship. I've had a kind of a front row seat to probably the guy that will go down as the best CEO in maybe energy history, if not shale history, based on from a returns perspective. It's pretty incredible. But most importantly, it hasn't really changed him, right? He's still the same guy. He's still third generation Midlander that drives a F-150 and has the same mentality that he had when Diamondback was a $500 million company as a $70 billion company, right? That's huge. And it's a very, very important learning lesson for me to kind of follow in those footsteps. I don't think I'll ever be as good of a guy as he is, but I'll certainly try.
Well, now we want to meet Travis. He sounds awesome.
He's getting into podcasts and things. I think slowly but surely we've gotten him, moving into this next generation. I'll tell a funny story. I was kind of I always I always have my headphones on to do work or reply to emails or get stuff done. And Travis had this mentality that if you had your headphones on, you weren't working. And then he saw my work product when I had my headphones on, and now he comes into my office and says, "Put your headphones on and get to work." So it's really evolved a lot here, and we have a really good culture where it's not hierarchical, right? We all kind of make fun of each other a little bit, but also trust each other and support each other in our decisions.
That's awesome. Part of something we want to talk to you about on like West Texas, particularly in Midland, is we've heard so many companies talk about how hard it is to get talent to come and move to Midland. Maybe it's gone easier over the years. I'm not sure, but I remember it was always like a big struggle. People didn't want to move from outside of outside of West Texas to West Texas.
Yeah.
How have you guys, being a very Midland based, like you got to be in the office here in Midland, Texas, how have you kind of, like, what was your recruiting strategy? Or did you guys not face what other companies were facing? Or like, what can you give advice wise?
Yeah, it's a battle. And it still is. I think it's getting better. I think it's kind of evolved from in the early days, you had so much competition for jobs in Midland and everywhere else. And the Permian was in its infancy. I think as the Permian has grown in relevance on not just the national stage, but a global stage, I think people realize that, there's a lot of staying power here, and there's a lot that can be advanced in your career by moving to Midland. Um, but it's been tough. It was tough for us. I mean, in the beginning, it was always we were trying to poach people from Concho or Pioneer or people down the street, and then we started to do a couple deals. Right, we bought Energen out of Alabama, and kind of it was a tough day. We went into their office and said, "Listen, we just got this deal done, but we're not going to have an Alabama office, and if you want to move to Midland, we're going to support you." And I think if you ask some of the people that came over from Energen, a lot of them are in senior leadership roles today at Diamondback. They'd say the move was hard, but now they love it here. And the joke about Midland is, you'll cry when you get here, but you'll cry when you leave. And so you really just have to get people to buy in and make the leap. And yeah, that first year in Midland, it kind of sucks. You're trying to meet new people and make new friends, but it's a very social city. It's a very embracing city if you put energy into it. And I think people are figuring that out now. I'm in a different position today, 10 years in, than I was when I was flying down here every week. But there were a couple years there where I tried to get out of here every weekend, and now we have hundreds of friends in town. So it's a good place. It's certainly getting better. There's more and more to do. There's more and more young people. There's more and more excitement. So Midland's kind of the hot spot.
I have to say that I always tell people like Midland's like the land of opportunity, especially if
It's
you're
the
in
land of
oil and
opportunity.
gas. If you
Who lived
Houston,
here? Did you live here,
I
Jamie?
didn't. Maciel,
I
she
did.
spent time there.
Massiel did. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did love it after. You're right. I didn't cry on my way out, but I almost did. I did love it.
Close.
Close.
I never lived there, but I traveled there a lot for work. And if I had colleagues or I had talked with a lot of customers there, but also a lot of my friends had moved there for their job, and they always ended up like the best opportunities. And so I've always been an advocate, especially if you really want to get out of like the Houston space. Houston is such a difficult space for salespeople, and it's very competitive. And when you go to Midland, you can actually build close relationships and see those people in multiple places in one day. Versus Houston, it's very difficult. So I've always felt like it's a really great opportunity for those like
Well,
especially
and
starting out.
everyone's here. Everyone's here for the same reason, right? We all
Yes.
like. There's no other industry, right? Unless you're a high school football coach, like we are all here with the same mission and the same goal, and so everybody knows everybody, and so that collegial culture, I think, really is important to the city.
Yeah, and that's what I personally really loved about when I went there to work. But I wanted to jump into something that you talked to us about, which I was pretty astonished with, which was the largest age group in Midland right now is the age 0 to 4, which does make a lot of sense when you think about all the young talent that had moved there to work for all these companies, and now they're all having children. And
Yep.
Diamondback recognized this, which I think is extremely amazing. And y'all decided to step in and support local schools to accommodate the growing population, which is another big question when people move there. Is always like, well, where are my kids going to school? Going to go to school? What's it like there? Like, is there good teachers? What is it? How has that helped Diamondback, and more importantly, help the community in investing in the schools? And do y'all even think about maybe down the road doing anything on daycares or caring for your employees when they have young children?
Yeah. So I'm guilty of that. I have two kids under 4, so I'm contributing to that big population bubble. I mean, I think it's very important as a company to understand what your mission should be on charitable giving, and what you should be focused on from a community perspective. There's certain issues that, in my mind, we had to get really involved in, and the biggest one was this school bond to build 2 new high schools in Midland. You have to get a bond approved to do big capex projects on the education side. And I knew with all the deals we'd done and all the people we tried to move to Midland that education is the number one issue for families with children in school moving to a new place, to this place. Our ratings were terrible on the public side. The private schools were full. Kids were in trailers at the high schools. We hadn't built a new high school since 1953 or something like that. So we don't normally try to get involved in every political issue, but if it's going to impact our employee base, then we should get involved. So we got pretty vocal that these two high schools need to happen. Fortunately, the bond passed, and what the two new high schools do is that those campuses open up the old high school campuses to do, junior high. You open up the old, and we also did big grade realignment. There in Midland, there was a freshman campus and then a sophomore to senior campus, which is ridiculous. And so that puts everybody in one high school, but also opens up all these other campuses for new junior high, new grade schools, a lot more pre-K, and just to alleviate the pressure of that backlog of kids that's coming through, come hell or high water, it's going to happen. So, we did that. We got pretty vocal on it. It was a contentious deal. People don't like spending money on taxes here. It was a small property tax increase, but I think it was money well spent. And so then, outside of that, on the daycare side, employee type stuff. I mean, we partnered with Endeavor actually and built a daycare or bought a daycare and split that. It's called Sprouts Daycare. I think that'll continue to grow certainly as we merge with Endeavor. But I think companies like us should continue to build out the employee experience. We had a very good front row seat to building out a good employee experience at Concho across the street. I don't think we'll go quite as far as building all our own buildings, but we certainly need to add perks and add things that make life easier in Midland.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I think just being involved in the future of education for Midland is so smart, because that is a huge, before having kids, I was like, I didn't even know people moved to be close to a good school. Like, I remember people
Right.
picking a home depending on the school zone, and I was like, what? But it's such an important thing for your kids' education. And if you want to have that talent in Midland, or you want to have employees there who aren't like, ooh, it's my kid's turning this age, I got to go back to a city where there is good schooling, that's the right approach.
Yeah, and there's been some of that, right? And that's a hard conversation when a good employee says, "Best job I ever had. I got to go back to Houston because
Yeah.
my family's there and school's better." So, Midland's making progress. I think the school bond was a big piece of that. There's more to do, but if I think people continue to see progress, it motivates them to want to stick around this city.
Awesome. And just to end the podcast, because I think we can go on and on. You have such a great story of tennis player, California, ended up CFO of Diamondback. Is just such an interesting story. But something I wanted to tap into on like leadership is, have you in your experience received like a really good piece of advice that you can share with us today that helped you elevate in your career? I don't know if it came from Travis or just from your dad, or when you were, I don't know, something you can think of that maybe you still live with today that you can share with us.
Well, I told you about know what you don't know, so that one I think is important. We kind of talked about the whole career path thing, and the advice I always got and give is, in the first 8 to 10 years of your career, don't say no to anything, right? Like, hey, kid, we need you to go to Midland, Texas,
Yeah.
and start modeling an oil company. Well, I was like, okay, I'll do that, and look at the opportunity presented. So like, don't close any doors early in your career. Be open to crazy things like going to Midland, when you live in Manhattan, and be patient, right? I mean, I think the wins will come as long as you work hard. The wins are going to come. So, we also kind of have one other saying that we have worked around Diamondback, and that's stay humble, stay hungry. And this was a tennis thing from college. Don't get too high on yourself when things are going well. Stay humble, keep working. And that's going to be kind of our big kind of rallying cry post Endeavor, because we've kind of done a great deal with them. It's going to be a great pro forma business, kind of a leader in the space, but there's more to do. We can't just sit on our heels. We've got to keep pushing and stay humble, stay hungry.
I love it. Kaes, like Massiel had mentioned, we love your story. It's just, when we first met, like I said in the beginning, it just really shocked me when I just heard like the whole tennis thing in California, and I'm like, Diamondback Energy, like none of it makes sense. How did this happen? And so I really enjoyed listening to your story again today, and I know our listeners will as well. And I think that you foster that whole opportunity the space that you just mentioned, which is you didn't say no to these things. And like, if you really think about it in perspective of being a young 20-year-old in New York, like also, you played tennis probably on the weekends there and met people, and you're in New York. It's like a cool vibe. And then they're like, hey, go to Midland. Most people would be like, oh, you're crazy. I'm not going to, I'm not going to spend the time there. But you took that opportunity, and I mean, it paid off immensely. And now you've lived there for almost 10 years. And I really love just what you embody and just like your energy. And thank you again for spending the time with us this morning and sharing your journey. And we're going to continue to follow Diamondback and all the great things that y'all are doing. And next time we're in Midland, we will definitely be reaching out and hope to meet in person.
I look forward to it, and thank you for what you guys are doing for the industry as well. It's very important, and we got a lot of work to do, but I think the tide's turning. I think we're making progress.
We definitely think so too. And if you like this episode, please like, subscribe. If you want to support the podcast, please leave a review. We love to hear from you. And to stay up to date with everything FTB, you can follow us on Instagram at Flipping the Barrel or on LinkedIn, Flipping the Barrel. Thank you again, and we'll catch you on the next episode.